I wish you bluebirds in the spring to hear your song, a song to sing, and then a kiss. More than this, I wish you love.
Welcome to the Forgiveness Solution Podcast. I'm Reverend Misty Time. So happy you could join us today. Today, we're going to talk about something we all deal with, money. So where does money and forgiveness go hand in hand? Well, we get ourselves into a pickle, and then we blame ourselves. Sometimes that's valid. But did we learn our lesson? And that's what's important. Today, we're going to talk to Lesa Artzberger, and she represents 5 Rings Financial. You know what she's going to talk about today? Being kind to yourself by forgiving your situation with money and planning in a positive way to move forward. Lesa, can you say hi to everyone?
Hi, everyone.
Great. We're so glad that you're here today because we all do this, don't we? We all, especially when we're younger, we get our first credit card and we're like, oh my gosh, it's like found money. And we don't really understand how credit cards work. And I think that our society has really made a mistake in how we, teach our young people about money. Because we are very much a needy society. We want. And I'm not any different than anybody else. Sure, I want a new pair of shoes. And when I was younger and got my first credit card, it was like a found $500. Didn't really understand compound interest, what that meant. And believe me, I got myself in a situation. And here on Forgiveness Solution, we talk about situational forgiveness. So it's not necessarily something that somebody's done to us, but it's something that we might have gotten ourselves into, or unfortunately something happens and that we have to forgive the situation. And I think this kind of falls into that category. So here I was, a young 21-year-old with, and believe me, sweetie, that was a long time ago, but I'm much wiser now. But the issue is that I had a $500 credit on this credit card, and I went and bought essentials, and I went and had some fun. Did not understand what that would do to me on a monthly interest situation and what my payment would be. Didn't think it could possibly be very much, but I was wrong. And how much time that simple $500 would take to pay off. And I felt pretty guilty about it afterwards, but I did learn something from it. And that's what Lesa's here to talk about first, is getting ourselves into financial trouble. And we're going to start with credit cards. And Lesa's also going to share with us some great stories about people who found themselves in a situation financially and were able to get themselves out and how they did it. So Lesa, can we start out with talking about credit cards?
Sure. It's the power of compound interest. It can either work for you or it can work against you. Albert Einstein calls that compound interest.
I didn't know Albert Einstein had anything to do with compound interest, but that's wonderful.
He says it's the 8th wonder of the world.
I see. Okay, so what do you recommend? And this is what Lesa does daily. She talks about people's financial future, and this would be perfect time to talk to somebody who might have a credit card issue. What would you recommend?
First and foremost, it's to recognize that perhaps we need to stop using the credit card so much and maybe put the credit card away for a while and try to budget our expenses, such as write everything down about what you're doing every month. How much is your gas and electricity? How much is your phone bill? What are you spending on your cable? How much is rent? And then how much do you have left over for groceries, necessities, and then hopefully having some fun, right?
Right. And I think that's where the credit cards get us into trouble. It's like found money, like, oh, we can go have fun now. And we forget what the compound interest does. Could you explain compound interest?
Absolutely. As I had mentioned, Albert Einstein considers it the 8th wonder of the world. And what he discovered was the rule of 72. And some of you may have heard of this before.
I have not.
But either compound interest can work for you or it can work against you. So if you've got 72 and you divide it by, let's say you're going to get 4% down at the bank. The bank teller is feeling very
generous.
good that day and giving you 4% on your money at the bank. Well, you take the 72, divide it by that 4, and that will give you the amount of years that it takes for you to double that money. And for instance, if you were 29 years old and you put $5,000 into the bank and left it, never touched it, it would double in 18 years. That would be at age 47. So then you would have $10,000 at the age of 47. And at the age of 65, you would have $20,000 because you would get 2 doublings out of that. Now, take that a step further. This is how significant compound interest can affect your life. Let's say that you actually put your $5,000 into something a little more generous, let's say 8%. Again, you would take the 72, divide it by 8. You would get 9 years. So every 9 years, your money will double.
That's if you're getting that percentage on that money, you don't touch it and keep it there, and the percentage stays the same, you would double your money at the end of 9 years?
Correct.
What was that?
Correct.
Okay.
So again, explaining that a little bit further, that same $5,000 in 9 years, which would be at age 38, would be $10,000. Then at age 47, it would be $20,000. Think of it like this. The other example where you were only making 4%, you were doubling at the age of 47 and you were at $10,000. Well, at the age of 47 with 8%, you already have $20,000. That's how significant just a couple interest
Wow.
points
I guess
make.
I don't really pay attention to that in regards to such a small number of a percent. So if it was working for me, because we've been talking about credit cards, that's the negative one, but we're talking about the positive spin on compound interest right now. And it's funny, I don't usually think of compound interest as positive, but it is. It's important that you pay attention to what percentage you are getting on in your money and whether you're going to touch it or not. That's very important. But I've never heard of the rule of 72 before. So thank you for sharing that, because I did not understand that.
Yeah, it's a quick understanding. And as Einstein teaches us, again, it can either work for you or it can work against you. What if you could get 18% or 21%
that would
interest?
Be
Wouldn't that be great?
That would be beautiful.
Well, we all have that. We all have that, and the men are probably carrying it around in their back pocket in a wallet.
Oh, are you talking about the credit card?
And women are carrying one around in their purse.
Right.
And that's your credit card.
And who's making that 21%? The bank.
The bank. Yeah, the bank. And so think about it this way. If you receive a bill and your minimum payment due is $35, that's just skimming the surface.
So they're still making interest, and it's not touching your principal at all, which is the original amount that you charge to the credit card.
Well, thank you. You catch on quick.
Well, at this age, I've definitely had a few credit cards and a few credit card mistakes. So talk about,
it can add up fast, Misty.
It can, and I have been on the resulting end of that a couple times. So instead of you making the positive compound interest as if you had taken your money and put it in the bank and let them pay you, now you are using their money and they're making you pay them.
Exactly. So that's why I really recommend, especially for young people that are really getting used to being out on their own and learning how to budget their money and spend their money wisely. They don't want to get into this trouble, as I'm sure you didn't want to get into that trouble with your first credit card. And it's so key to, again, write those things down. And I've even had the conversation with myself, gee, do I really need that extra channel on cable for an extra $15 added on? Because again, each month that you add on $15, that's $15 that you could be paying off your credit card. It's really important to never just pay the minimum. It's always essential to pay as much as you can, and that's where you begin with your budget, and then you figure out how much you have left over so you can get that credit card paid off, and then hopefully put that extra money towards making that compound interest versus just paying it.
Well, that's a beautiful way to say that, and I actually understand more than I did before about the compound interest. I always knew that they compounded it on my credit card, but I never thought of it as paying me. I always thought, oh, well, the bank will give me some interest. Wow, that's just a great way to explain that to everyone. So also, if you're that person that does have that debt and you're beating yourself up over it because you're like, wow, I got myself in trouble. And some of those happen for very valid reasons, medical issues and bills, and then maybe
absolutely
being laid off or something like that. But I think Lesa brings up a perfect place for forgiveness right here. Forgive yourself, understand you came from a situation, or you just weren't paying attention, which, you know, we all do it. Don't beat yourself up. But the moment you take your power back, that's where forgiveness comes in. Forgive yourself and make a plan and stick to it.
And make a plan. I'll tell you what, Misty, the medical issues are really one of the number one issues that are facing us. And maybe we can talk about that at another conversation.
Yeah, because that's definitely a big piece, especially so when you're younger, you're not thinking about that, right? You're just not. You feel immortal. But as you get older, not to pick on myself, but I'm going to pick on myself. I turned 50 recently, and it's funny, I joke with my friends that I'm like, what happens at 50? Do you magically start breaking down? Is it like a car at the end of their warranty? What's going on? And it's really where things kind of get, you just have to start taking care of yourself really well. It's not just, by the way, take care of yourself. But say someone, unfortunately, gets a cancer diagnosis or something like that, and they end up having to use their credit cards to live off of. And that's where, oh my gosh, that debt seems almost impossible. That would be an impossible debt to pay off. Does that feel like that?
I've seen it time and time again. In fact, I have a very dear friend of mine that was in a very severe car accident, and it took all of her savings, and then she was racking up her bills on the credit card and debt to pay off her medical bills. And it was a very, very difficult situation. It literally took her a good 15 years to pay off all that medical debt.
Wow,
and
that's just amazing. Yeah.
And now she doesn't have the savings, and here she is 50 years old. But it's never too late. It's never too late. She's persevered. She's got her medical bills paid off, and now it's time to start putting that compound interest towards her future.
Right. And now that we understand compound interest so much better, I think that really helps me, and I definitely think that we should teach our children this from early on.
The earlier you start, the better.
Right. And writing down what you spend. How many times do you go and get a latte that's, $5? Don't mean to pick on any large coffee companies, but, they're not cheap. And then where you could have just made yourself a coffee at home and taken it with you. And what would that $5 be compounded on an interest, right?
Well, now that you mention it, I have that coffee habit, and I've had to kick it. Believe it or not, if you think about it, you think, gee, can I save $5 a day? Guess what? That's your latte, and that's $150 a month.
Wow.
Do you realize that?
No, it's funny how you don't add it up. I think writing it down is really key. You find out where the holes are, where your money is going, and that way you can plug that hole and stop it and plan for your future. Now, I'm going to speed forward from my 21st year where I had that credit card. I did pay off that credit card, and then I was scared of it. I didn't want to use it ever again, which I don't think necessarily is a realistic approach with credit cards. So what is a realistic approach in using your credit card?
Well, a lot of people are using their credit cards to buy their airline tickets and rental cars and groceries and whatnot. And why is that? Because the credit cards have put these incentives there where we can, win points and get extra miles and pay for extra airline flights and so on and so forth. But if you don't have the money on the back end in your account to pay it off every month, you're better off not going that route. Because again, you're going to be paying more in the long run unless you can pay your credit card balance off every month. Don't use it.
Well, that's all of a sudden making that free plane ticket not so free.
It's exactly right.
Right. So I know that is one of the practices that I use, is I do use a specific credit card for bills, groceries, for specifically airline points, so that the family can travel, there'd be an extra free ticket. But you have to be pretty savvy by a certain point, or have made enough mistakes like I did, to understand that you need to pay your credit card off. If you do have a balance at the end of the month and you don't pay it off, they do the interest on that balance.
Correct. And then let's say you made the minimum payment of, $100. So they subtract the $100, but then there's still interest on everything again left over. And that's the power of compound interest. When you're making money, as you can see, $100 plus $100 plus $100, you're getting it each time compounded. That's why the credit card companies are receiving that compounded interest in an exponential way as well. It's the same aspect.
Wow. Well, I know we've talked a lot about credit cards and being smart about your money, and we've talked about making a plan and seeing where your money goes. So, Lesa, if I've come to you and said, I figured out my credit card problem, I paid off my credit card, now I'm using it wisely, and now I would like to make a plan for my future, because I really had to work on myself or my situation or a divorce or a medical issue and get through that and forgive myself putting myself in trouble. And so I've worked on that, and I've come to you and say, what's next for someone, say, in their 30s who figured out the credit card thing, have a job that brings in money enough to pay their regular bills and has a little bit left over. What would you say to them?
To definitely make a plan for saving some money in a tax-free environment, or at least a tax-deferred environment. And I always took advantage of the 401k plans when I was working for big companies. And I think that that's important. I think it's really key to be able to put your money into something like that. But keep in mind that the 401k plans are mutual funds, and they are all in the stock market. You're going to have fees on those mutual funds. And again, the fees are going to add expenditures to your 401k. So I wouldn't leave money on the table. If your company is matching you, I would definitely take advantage of that. Don't leave that money. But also, don't necessarily do anything extra. Take the extra money that you want to save and put it into a tax-free growth fund that will give you more benefits down the road.
Now, everything Lesa's talking about, because I've had some life experience behind me, I understand it. But I remember when I didn't. And my company had a 401k, and I chose not to participate in it because I was worried that it would take money away from my paycheck. And I really needed that. At the time, I was a single mom, and I was worried that my paycheck would drop, and I just couldn't have that happen. Later on, a very kind gentleman explained to me that what tax-free meant. And you've said that like 3 or 4 different times in what we just talked about. And a lot of people don't understand what that really means. So when you're putting money into something, and it's coming from your paycheck, what does tax-free mean?
Well, when it's coming from your paycheck, that is qualified money. And that is what would be going into the 401k. And you would grow it tax-deferred. That money in the 401k, once you turn it on as you retire, you need to start taking that money out of that account. well, then you do have to pay the taxes on that.
So that's what it means by tax deferred. I'm not paying
That's
it now,
tax-
but I'll probably pay something later.
And guess what? Are taxes going to be greater now or greater when you retire is the question.
Right. And that is a big question. And Lesa talked about companies that match your 401k. What does that mean? So if I gave $10 to my 401k, there are companies out there that will match either half or all of it. So that's like they just gave you a $10 raise. That's pretty awesome. So that means that every paycheck, if you put in $100, they would match it and give you $100. It's very hard to turn away free money. I know I like free money. It does mean that I do have to think about the tax later, but it also means it comes out of your paycheck before they tax your paycheck, correct?
Correct.
So what that did for me way back when I was a single mom, and I found out real fast that if I took the money out before taxes and put it in my 401k, that my paycheck didn't really change because of the tax liability. And it was kind of hard for me to wrap my brain around. As soon as I did, I was very relieved, and within 3 or 4 years, I had all of a sudden $50,000 in my 401k. And that was pretty significant. But then I left the company. And that's also another time that you have a choice to do something with that money, still tax deferred. And that's where Lesa comes in and helps you with all the options. It is very important that you find an expert like Lesa to help you, because it can be very confusing. I mean, if you might have to listen to this a couple times to even get all the things that we've talked about. If you've not used those terms, 401k and compound interest, it's very, very confusing at first, but it's extremely necessary.
And each individual is going to have different needs. And as you can see through this scenario, we just talked about so many different items, including compound interest, rule of 72, 401ks, tax deferred, tax-free, mutual funds, and I sit down with each individual and really help guide them as to what's going to be best for their family, and it might be something different that's from your particular situation.
Your situation, whether you have kids, whether you're married, your tax liability,
exactly.
A whole bunch comes into play at some point. And we want for our kids is to have a healthy life that is financially secure. And I don't want to have to support my kids their whole life. You know, they need to support themselves. And then there's retirement. So all of a sudden, I might be at the age of retirement. And Lesa, talk about people who are faced with retirement and what that really means to them.
I don't think that a lot of people really think about how much it's actually going to take in retirement. And that's a piece that most people don't start thinking about retirement until they're, guess what age?
Probably 60. 55?
Well, it's about 53.
About 53. Okay, close in there.
Feeling their own mortality. And I think a lot of times that starts to happen because their own parents are possibly struggling and they're seeing their own parents having to go into a nursing home, or they're taking their parents in and taking care of them. And I know that that's what happened with my family, is that my father passed away, and we needed to put my mother into a facility. And she's actually very with it, but still needed to be in a facility that would be able to cook for her and at least take care of her minimally and not be in the big house anymore. And I started thinking, oh geez, have I prepared for that? What if I need to do that? And what if I need more care in the future? What if something happens?
Right. Exactly. And just a couple weeks ago, one of the podcasts we did was with senior health. And we talked about Alzheimer's and dementia, which my mother suffered from. And her care was extremely expensive. Literally very expensive. People don't understand that Medicare or the government will not pay for long-term care assisted living facilities. And it does fall back on the children. So this is a conversation I could also see happening with the parents. So the adult children having conversations. Have you saved? What are your plans? And I never had that conversation with my mom. She was a businesswoman. She was a go-getter. I wasn't worried about it. But she was a child of World War II. So she thought Social Security was supposed to take care of her. So all she really ended up with was her home that was paid for, and a very small home that was paid for, and living off Social Security. Most of us nowadays don't believe that Social Security will be with us later, but let's say that it is. Does Social Security really going to cover
is it really going to be enough?
Yeah, is it really going to be enough? And how often do you get that question?
Every day. Yeah, every day. I think a lot of our parents also had pensions. My father and mother were blessed enough to have a pension. My father worked for the same company for 50 years. I just don't think that that's going to be the case for our generation.
No.
And there really aren't pensions out there anymore. But there are vehicles that act like a privatized pension.
Wow, that's interesting.
And those are really great to be able to take care of you in the future. And the younger that you can get into something like that, the better, because again, the power of compound interest.
Wow, I have never.
It comes all
Yeah,
full circle.
I will never look at compound interest the same way. So we've talked a lot today about really somebody's life, from being young and their first experience with a credit card to growing old and needing care. And it is so important to understand that you have the power. I always talk about the power of forgiveness, and really forgive yourself for your financial mistakes. I know I've had to forgive myself a few times. And,
no kidding.
Yep. And then also understand where your money goes. Talk to an expert like Lesa. It's just so important to be in charge of your life. And then it sounds like also these are good conversations to have both with our children and with our parents.
I totally agree.
Right. Well, Lesa, today has been really special because people are like, why would you have somebody talking about finances on a forgiveness station? Well, I know we've all gotten ourselves into some pickles before. We have to kind of forgive ourselves. It's a learning curve. That's what forgiveness lets you do. It lets you learn from your mistakes or even other people's mistakes. Forgive yourself and move forward. Lesa, you're here in San Diego, correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay. If I know people from everywhere listen to the Forgiveness Solution podcast here on Sacred Stories, and I'm so grateful, and I would love to hear from you. But if somebody wants to get a hold of you specifically, Lesa, in San Diego, how would they find you?
Well, I have a website, and it is www.benefitsbyartz, which is ARTZ.com. And also my phone.
Okay, but feel free. If somebody's out there in San Diego and wants to get a hold of Lesa Artzberger with 5 Rings Financial, Lesa, what's your number?
It's 858-401-9026.
And your email?
LAMONALESA@gmail.com.
So Mona Lisa, I like that. So, all right. Well,
thank you, Misty.
Thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure.
And anybody else out there, if you want to get a hold of me, you can find me at revmisty.com here on the Sacred Stories podcast, and my website is Rev Misty. I look forward to hearing from you and talking about forgiveness issues, whether it be forgiving a person or a situation or yourself for maybe buying too many pairs of shoes. Well, thanks again.
Thank you, Misty.
I wish you bluebirds in the spring to hear your song, a song to sing, and then a kiss more than this. I wish you love.